Hey everyone, today I want to talk about all the different generations of the Dodge Viper, some of the evolutions that the car had undergone. There have been 5 generations of the Viper since the car has been introduced. The first generation of the Viper was from 1992 until 1995. That was known as the RT10 because it was only available in convertible. The car made 400 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. Now at the time that was pretty insane. Corvettes were making 300 at that time, so 400 was almost unheard of, and it really made the car very, very popular. They had not done any major changes throughout the evolution of the first generation car. They had done some minor tweaks here and there, but nothing major. A few more options, factory options became available as time went on, things like factory air conditioning and a hard top to go with the soft top that the car came with. And they didn't do any specialty models, but some more colors had become available later on in production. The car was just designed to be a very simple, back to basics sports car, meant to sort of be a modern interpretation of the Shelby Cobra. So the car had manual door locks, plastic windows. It had a soft tonneau cover for a top, side exhaust. It had no air conditioning for the first 2 years. No anti-lock brakes, no traction control, no stability control, no airbags. So the car was basically meant to be as simple as a performance car can be. Just a very simple, basic layout, sort of a minimalist design. Most of the refinement then came in the second generation Dodge Viper, 1996 until 2002. Car had undergone some major changes. Most notably, you had the RT10 convertible still available. Now you had the introduction of the Gts Coupe. It was a long-awaited option. It further enhanced the performance of the car and really made it a world-class sports car because the car was able to outperform a lot of its foreign competition from Ferrari and Porsche, not just in acceleration, top speed, but in handling as well. Some of the major changes that the car had undergone: power was now up to 450 horsepower and 490 pounds of torque. Some of the specialty models made a little bit more, but that's what the bulk of the cars were making. Beyond the engine, some of the major changes for the car: it was rear exit exhaust only. The side pipes were gone. Car now got airbags. They put a CD player in it. All the cars had standard air conditioning. The interior had a little bit of refinement as the car aged, a little bit more electronics. You had glass windows that were powered. You now had electric door locks. So the car had seen a lot of major changes, as well as a lot of little cosmetic and minor tweaks here and there. Also, anti-lock brakes were brought out in 2001. That was another long-awaited change to the car. They also did a lot of specialty models. They did the 98 GT2 or GTSR, which was white with blue stripes to commemorate the win at Le Mans. Did 100 of those. They also did 360 of the 2002 FE or Final Edition cars. They were all red with white stripes to commemorate the end of the production run for this body style, the Viper. And I think by far of all the specialty models that they did, the most well-known for second generation was the ACR. The ACR was introduced in 1999 until 2002. That was the first incarnation of the ACR, contrary to what most people believe. It didn't have a big wing on it. It wasn't as flashy as some of the later ACRs, but it had suspension and wheel enhancements to make it a more track-focused version of the already very capable car. So they did do a lot of changes. They also offered some one-year-only colors: 2000, 2001, 2002. Each year saw a one-year-only color. So this really helped to bring the Viper, bring up the status of the Viper, and give buyers a lot more options and make a lot more people interested in the car. Next came the third generation Viper. Third generation, 2003 to 2006. Now, power had increased once again from an engine that was refined and bumped up to 8.3 liters now. So now you had not only more power, but a bigger engine. Power was up to 500 horsepower and 525 pounds of torque. The 06 has got a little bit more power, but that's what the bulk of the cars were making. By far, the biggest change and most controversial was the body style. For first and second generation cars, they had looked the same, but underneath the cars were mechanically very different. Now with the third gen cars, the body was totally different, as well as some of the mechanics. It went from a very rounded off shape to now a very angular shape. The interior was reconfigured completely. It still had that plastic interior that most people kind of expected from American cars at that time, but they changed the way it was configured. It got a nicer set of seats in it. When it was introduced in '03, it was only available as the SRT10, which was a convertible. And the convertible top was a little bit more user-friendly than the traditional RT10 tonneau cover top was. So that was another major change. A couple minor drivetrain tweaks, but really nothing huge to the car. They were mainly looking to change the design of the car at that time, and they had further improved the performance capabilities of the car. Unfortunately for the third generation car, it has kind of become the unloved generation, because a lot of people felt that the second generation was a better look with the rounded styling of the car, and what would later become the fourth generation, they had made some very significant improvements to the car. So you had a design that people preferred on one end and major performance enhancements on the other, so it kind of became an unloved car. And then in 2006, with the third generation cars, they introduced once again the SRT10 Coupe. So now you had both a coupe and convertible option for third generation, and they did, one of the special models that they did for that was the Gts Coupe in 2006, which was basically to commemorate 10 years later from the original Gts Coupe, so they did them all in blue with the white stripes. They did 150 of those cars, but that was pretty much it for the third generation cars. Next was fourth gen. They took a year off in '07, so 2008 to 2010 was the fourth generation Vipers. Power had increased now, and for the first time ever, the car has now made more horsepower than torque. Power increased to 600 horsepower and 560 pounds of torque. The car underwent some very major changes. Obviously, the engine was significantly more powerful. It also was bumped up to 8.4 liters instead of 8.3, as well as a lot of internal changes to the engine. The transmission was completely upgraded. A lot of the car systems were fly-by-wire systems as opposed to mechanically driven systems. The differential was changed. Some minor interior tweaks. It now had navigation in it to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And then there was more color options. The hood was changed, and there was some more wheel options available. So it really set it apart from the third generation car, even though it looked very, very similar. With the fourth generation car was back with the introduction of the ACR. That was one of the special models that became available. That's the ACR that most people are very familiar with. That's the car. It had a lot of really bold colors. It had a lot of aggressive aerodynamic work on. It had the big wing on the back. It had the splitter on the front, and some special unique wheels on it. That car set a lot of records, that version of the ACR. And they also did an ACR Extreme version of that, which was even more stripped down than the standard ACR was. So it was really elevating the capabilities of the car, the fourth generation cars. And they also did some other special mods. They did like a 133 model and a Voodoo and some other different models to it. So there were a lot more options available. Now Dodge had decided to cancel the car for a couple of reasons, but it basically took a few years off until the fifth generation came out. In 2013, they reintroduced the car as the fifth gen car. 2013, 2017. When the car came out, it now retained an 8.4 liter engine, but the power was bumped up to 640 horsepower and 600 pounds of torque. So at this point, the car was becoming extremely powerful. The car has basically been completely revamped inside and out. They went back to the look of the first and second generation cars, going to a much more rounded look. The clamshell hood had returned. They got into the use of a lot more carbon fiber parts. The interior had been updated significantly. For the first four generations of the car, One of the biggest criticisms of it was the cheap plasticky interior. Well, now they had listened to a lot of those criticisms and they had drastically changed the interior to make it much more luxurious. Now you had a much higher quality materials. It was all modern, updated electronics. And this was also the first generation of the Viper to have traction control standard on the car. Now car now had cruise control. So now it's becoming a much more user-friendly, daily driver capable car than a lot of the previous generations had. So obviously there was major changes throughout, different wheels, different brakes. It was a completely different car. No bones about it. Unfortunately, the 5th generation car was only available as a coupe. They never did a convertible version. There were some companies offering conversions, but it was not available from the factory, so it was only the GTS Coupe. They also did an SRT Coupe as well. Basically more basic version of the car, just to keep the cost down. But the car was now becoming a major competitor on the international stage now that they had offered a lot more amenities to the car. And they also now had offered even more specialty models. They did like the TA, which is a more track-focused car, and then later on they would once again reintroduce the ACR, which is even more track-focused with even more aggressive aerodynamics on the car. They also offered a lot of bold color schemes, and towards the end of production, in 2016, 2017, they now offered a lot of special edition. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they offer a lot of special editions to commemorate sort of the end of production. They did another GTSR color scheme car, as well as some special dealer colors. But they had really tried to elevate the Viper to be really a world-class sports car at that point, and offer buyers a lot more options, like one-off colors were available. They also dropped the MSRP of the car, trying to make it as popular as they possibly could. So that's a really basic, brief overview of the 5 generations of the Viper and some of the major changes that they had made. Now, as of right now, it's 2018. Viper production has ceased on the car. There's a lot of speculation as to whether or not it will come back. Some magazines are saying yes, some of them are saying no. This is my personal opinion on the car. Even though the car has undergone a lot of changes throughout its history, it has always retained a lot of the same characteristics. It's always been front engine, rear drive. It's always been a 6-speed manual transmission. It's always been 2 seats. It's always just been a very focused driver's car, and the DNA of the car, like I said, even though it's been refined, the DNA of the car has always remained the same. Now, one of the speculations is that if they do bring it back, they're going to try to make the car more cost-effective by using a lot more parts, or using a lot more parts from other Chrysler or FCA vehicles to keep the cost down. Now, if they're going to bring the Viper back and they're going to retain most of the original Viper DNA, I think it's okay to call it the Viper, but some people are speculating that the car is going to be completely changed, where it may or may not be a V10 anymore to keep costs down. It is probably not going to be either offered in a manual or only offered in a manual. Now we're talking about automatics or paddle shift cars. And some people have gone even more extreme than that. Is it still going to be 2 seats only? Is it still going to be rear drive only? So there's a lot of questions up in the air as to whether or not the car will even come back. And my personal opinion is, if you're going to completely change the DNA of the car, I think they're better off calling it something else and letting the Viper go out with its dignity as the car was, rather than trying to bring it back as more of a mass-produced car and just reusing the name with a car that shares virtually no heritage with the first 5 generations of the car. But I think if they're going to bring the car back and still keep the bulk of the DNA traditional to the Viper, but maybe make some changes just to get a few more buyers in, so they can continue production and keep the car going, I think that would be okay. So that's my personal opinion as to the future of the Viper. I do hope that the car comes back and it retains its roots to what the first 5 cars have been. Unfortunately, the car has a lot of negative stigma about it, which a lot of it really isn't true. Check out my other videos and some myths and some of the things that people say about Vipers, and unfortunately, a lot of the things people say about this car isn't true. It is a great driver's car. It is a very manageable car. It's not hard to drive. As long as you have a lot of self-control, it's fun to drive. It's easy to drive. You can drive it around. As a more daily kind of ish car, it's a good weekend car. It's a good get around town car. It's not the best as a daily commuter, but the later cars, you can daily commute them if you're willing to make some more compromises. But that's my opinion on the car and the history and future of the Dodge Viper. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.